Thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to chat with you. I was asked to talk about what it's like to be at the bleeding edge of innovation and also, ultimately, to what does it mean to innovate. So, innovation is an interesting word, isn't it? We often think of it as a thing, but it is not a thing, it's a process. Innovation is a process by which we create something or to give us value. In the world that I came from, which is the military, it was to create a capability. That is why we did what we did. So I came from an agency called DARPA, and DARPA was founded during a time of crisis. It was when Sputnik went up and the US felt to be falling behind. And how could it fall behind Russia, who had an economy 1/10 of ours, a population of 1/10 of ours, and so on and so forth. And it turned out that we had a remarkable, innovative leader at the time by the name of General Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the president at that time. And Eisenhower had just, of course, won the Second World War. And he did it through the history that you all know, which was a lot of it was, in fact, through innovation, through industry, through tactics, through a number of other things. They changed the face of it. And that's, in fact, how they were able to defeat the Nazis and the Axis Empire. So he created this agency called DARPA. And DARPA's whole point is how do you put innovation into practice? How do you create a technology that will create surprise? And that was the point. And at the same time, by creating surprise, you prevent yourself from being surprised. That was the point. And that's, in fact, what we're trying to do here in this room. Everybody in this room is here for really one reason, and that is, how can we make the human condition better? How can we play our part in making our fellow human have a better life? That's why we're here. We're here ultimately for that one reason. And that's a wonderful reason to be here. That's a beneficent reason. That's a reason that you could tell your grandchildren what you did and what value you personally provided to mankind before you exit, because we're all going to die. Now, I'm sorry to tell you guys that I am not a cardiologist, all right? I am a neurologist, which is totally an anathema to most of my friends who are doing medicine, because neurologists are well known to diagnose and adios. So, but here we are trying to come together and, in fact, not do that, but actually trying to do something to improve the human condition. So when we talk about innovation, it is, again, about a process. It begins with an idea, often a serendipitous idea, but it begins with an idea. And then it has to carry forward until ultimately, as Kevin put it so well, into deployment, all right? But it is ultimately to create value. And that value has different meaning for different folks that are part of this innovative process. So innovation begins with an innovator with a great idea, in this case, Kevin, but ultimately along the pathway, it requires innovation at other different parts, as you had heard from all of our prior speakers. You have to innovate when you get to the regulatory group. You have to innovate when you get to manufacturing. You have to innovate when you actually get to the end user, which is the provider and the patient. That relationship, provider and patient, is actually the most important thing. There would be no Northwell. There would be no CMS. There would be no FDA if there wasn't a provider and a patient. Grandma is the most important person in this equation. Grandma is who we're focusing on. And so ultimately, that last step is the most crucial step. So in innovation, especially in my world, which is the military, it begins with a single word. And that word is yes. You have to say yes. If you say no, you're done. You're done. You go home, you take a nap, you're done. If you say yes, you got to go to work. So when Kevin saw his remarkable finding with vagal nerve stimulation, it turned the table a little bit. He now had to go to work. He had to think about the next series of experiments. He had to raise money. He had to educate students, blah, 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 blah. And then we got to the next step after that. He had to think about, how do I transition to patients? He had to get into an innovative group of clinicians who would embrace what he is proposing, because what he's proposing is quite radical. If you think about it, it's a third new arm of medical treatment. The first arm, of course, is medicine. That's why it's called medicine, right? It is giving a pharmacologic agent. Hippocrates talked about this. Galen talked about this. Second came surgery. Surgery was very crude in the beginning, but ultimately became refined and became part of medicine. Now third, we're talking about directed energy. It's technology, you talk about it, but what is technology doing? That thing that is stuck in the neck here, that little thing, that set point device, it's actually delivering energy to the nerve. That's what it's doing. And there are many other examples of this that are coming about. There are a lot of fast followers, and there will be many more, and this is a good thing. This is a good thing. Of the 18,500 diseases identified by the NIH, only 20% are treatable. 20% are treatable. So there's a lot of room for everybody. So nobody's going to be left out of this. There's lots of room for everybody. But let's come back again to this innovation notion. You have to have innovators at every step. The FDA needs innovators. They need innovative thinking. They do have an emergency technology office, the ETT, the Emerging Technology Team. They're wonderful. They're really good people. You have to engage them, though. You have got to go to CMS. Somebody's got to pay for it. And it seems easy. They got lots of money, but they're paying for everything, and it's a zero-sum game for them. You have to deal with the insurance companies. You have to deal with the investors. There's a lot of friction going from here to there. It requires innovation at every step. What I like to tell people when we started this whole process back in the day was there were 3 big steps in my world. I guess there's 4 now that the way Kevin defined it, right? There's discovery. That is absolutely true. That requires innovation. Then there's development. And that is another set of innovation on how you do that. How do you make this thing that Kevin saw in the lab into a small deployable device? And the last one is the deployment, right, getting it to the patient. But I also have another D, it's called the FDA, all right? And so you got to get to the FDA to get to all these other places. But these are known friction points, and it requires innovators at every step. Because the easiest answer to give is no. No assumes risk. And all of these things that are new require risk. If you think way back to your grandfather, when they first had an elevator, it was a scary thing to do, right? I mean, you had some dude here working the stick who could barely speak English, and you're going to be elevated up, hundreds of feet in the sky held by a rope. But now elevators are commonplace, correct? You don't think about it when you push the button. But there took risk in the beginning to even get on the thing, let alone run the thing, and let alone put it into a building, all right? So at every innovation, you need something simple like that. This is not that simple, and it requires assumption of risk. And so when we talk to people, and this is what our job in this room is, we have to understand that is what we're trying to overcome. The natural risk aversion everybody has. I don't want to lose money. I don't want to lose my life. I don't want to give up this. So we have to do that. And this is not a small thing. You think that, oh, this is easy. I just got to go out and tell them about it and everything's great. Wrong. The COVID vaccine, scientifically, was 95% effective. But in reality, it was only 60% effective. And you know why that is? 30% of the patients did not take it. It was free. It was given out in a supermarket, D'Agostino's. And they still wouldn't take it. Right? That meant that it was 30% ineffective. It didn't help them. I think the largest risk that we have right now isn't getting through FDA, isn't setting up the market. I think that's going to happen, is getting patients to embrace it, is getting grandma to embrace it. And there's a lot of headwinds, because one thing we've done very badly in our community, this entire community, is getting the message appropriately to the end users. You heard about the issue about congestive heart failure. That's just one example. I still practice medicine, an old beat-up man like me. I mean, remember, the Army kicked me out because I got fat, short, and ugly. So, but I still practice medicine. Next week, I will pick up the neuro ICU at Hopkins. I will run that ICU. And I see this. Those of us who still practice medicine, which is many of the people in this room, they look and they have to convince grandma that this is in her best interest. And she's running against Google and all these maniacs that are out on in the ether world. But the fact is, that's reality. So I'm going to wrap up and simply say is that innovation is not just Kevin, but all of the steps along the way. We need multiple Kevins. We need a Kevin in the manufacturing. We need a Kevin on the FDA side, and we need a Kevin certainly sitting across from their patient and educating them, saying that this is an opportunity. This is a real opportunity. This is a new third leg of therapy. We need to embrace it, but we also need to show them and tell them and educate them that this is something that they want. Thank you.